The one-eyed man limped onto my set with murder in his remaining eye. What he did in the next 10 minutes would haunt me for the rest of my life. But first, you need to understand how a forgotten hero walked out of history and into my world. March 1969, Colorado Mountains, True Grit set, noon sharp. I am sitting in my director's chair, wearing Rooster Cogburn's eye patch, practicing my lines. Fake drunk Marshal. That is what I am, playing a character I thought I understood. Then security rushes over to me, faces pale. Duke, there is a situation. A man had pushed through the barriers, real eye patch over his left eye, not a costume prop like mine. Left leg dragging behind him like dead weight. The kind of limp that tells stories of violence. But it was his face that stopped everyone cold. Pure rage, mixed with something deeper. Something that looked like grief. You ever seen a man carry 30 years of being forgotten? It changes how they stand, how they breathe, how they look at the world. This man carried that weight like a cross, and he was walking straight toward me. You think this is funny? His voice cut through the mountain air like a blade. Every crew member within 50 yards stopped working. Cameras went quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I stood up, eye to eye with this stranger who felt anything but strange. The eye patch, the badge pinned to his worn jacket, the way he held himself, despite the limp. I was looking at everything I was pretending to be, but there was something in his working eye that made my stomach drop. Recognition? No, something worse. Betrayal. What is your name, partner? I kept my voice steady, but my hands were already shaking. Some instinct was telling me this moment was about to change everything I thought I knew about heroes. Carl Henderson, U.S. Marshal, 32 years service. His voice cracked on the numbers. They used to call me Rooster. The set went dead silent. 50 crew members, a dozen actors, all frozen like someone had hit pause on the whole world. I stared at this man, at his real eye patch, at the genuine Marshal's badge, at the pain carved into every line of his face. The character I was playing wasn't fiction. He was standing right in front of me. But here is what nobody on that set knew. What I was about to learn in the most humbling way possible. Carl Henderson hadn't come to meet John Wayne, the movie star. He'd come to confront the man who was about to turn his life into entertainment. And what he was carrying inside him was about to teach me the difference between acting and living. I heard you are playing a character named Rooster Cogburn, Carl continued, his voice getting stronger, angrier. One, Aide Marshal drunk, a joke of a man. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the scar tissue around his missing eye. That is my life you are mocking up there, on your screen. Have you ever had someone accuse you of trivializing their pain? That moment when you realize you might have been treating someone's real suffering as your entertainment? Keep that feeling in mind, because what happened next taught me something about respect I'd never learned in 40 years of making movies. I took off my prop eye patch, both my real eyes locked onto his one good one. Sir, you've got it wrong. But even as I said it, something was shifting inside me. Looking at Carl Henderson, I knew I didn't have it right. Not even close. I didn't know what it felt like to lose an eye in the line of duty. Didn't know what it felt like to be forgotten by the country you served. Didn't know what it felt like to see your life turned into a Hollywood joke. But I was about to learn. Come with me, I said, walking toward the wardrobe trailer. Not because I had answers, but because I needed to understand what I'd gotten wrong. Carl limped after me, suspicious but curious. Inside the trailer, surrounded by costumes and props, I started pulling down the research materials. This belt. I picked up the gun rig, heavy leather worn smooth. It is modeled after the rigs that Fort Smith Marshals wore in the 1880s. We studied museum pieces, photographs. I set it down, picked up the badge. Exact replica of the ones issued by Judge Parker's court. We researched every detail. Carl stared at the badge. His hand trembled. That is when I saw it, the first crack in his armor. This wasn't just anger. This was a man who'd been carrying something alone for too long. The way Rooster walks, talks, drinks, but still does his job, I continued. The way he is broken but won't quit. That is not mockery, Marshal. That is honor. Carl's voice shook. You don't know what it is like being forgotten, being a joke. And there it was. The real wound, not just the missing eye, but the missing recognition, the missing respect. Years of being invisible while Hollywood turned men like him into cartoons. I looked at this forgotten hero, this real Marshal who'd given his eye for justice, who'd served for 32 years and retired to silence. And I made a decision that would change both our lives. You are right, I don't know, but I know this character I am playing. He is not a joke. He is the toughest man in the movie, and he is based on men like you. I paused, meeting his eye. I need your help to get it right. What happened in the next moment was something I'd never experienced in 4 decades of filmmaking. Carl Henderson, this broken, forgotten hero, started to cry. Not the pretty tears you see in movies, real tears. 30 years of pain and anger and loneliness pouring out of a man who'd kept it buried since the day he turned in his badge. But here is what shocked everyone, including me. Instead of breaking down, Carl Henderson started talking, and what he told me about being a real Marshal, about the price of justice, about what it really means to serve something bigger than yourself. That is what turned my performance from acting into truth. We weren't heroes, Carl said, wiping his eyes. We were men doing a hard job for $3 a day, had to buy our own horses, our own guns, our own ammunition. He touched his eye patch. I got this in Tulsa, 1932. Bank robber named Eddie Shaw, warehouse shootout. He shot first, got my eye before I got him. I leaned forward. Doctor said you'd never work again? Said a one-eyed man can't aim, can't judge distance, can't marshal. But I kept working 18 more years until 1950. Then I turned in my badge. Nobody cared. No ceremony, no thank you. Just cleaned out my desk and went home. That is when I understood. The real tragedy wasn't losing an eye in a gunfight. It was being forgotten by the country he'd served. It was watching Hollywood turn men like him into caricatures while the real heroes died in silence. What if I told you this movie could change that? I asked. Carl laughed, bitter and broken. A movie can't change nothing. Maybe not, but it can remind people you existed, that men like you were real. I made my decision right there, Marshal Henderson. I want you to stay. Watch me work. Tell me when I get it wrong. Make sure Rooster honors you. What Carl Henderson did next shocked everyone on that set. This forgotten hero, this broken man who'd been carrying 30 years of pain, stood up straighter than he had in decades. The Marshal was back. For 2 weeks, Carl became part of our set. He sat in a folding chair next to mine, watching every scene, correcting every mistake. When I held the gun wrong, he showed me the real way. When I played Rooster too soft, he reminded me that real marshals had to be harder than the criminals they chased. But the moment that changed everything happened during the courtroom scene. Between takes, Carl started talking about real trials. They weren't dramatic, he said. Boring, lawyers asking the same questions 20 different ways, trying to make you look like a liar even when you told the truth. How'd you handle it? I asked. Told the truth, short answers, didn't explain. If they wanted to make me look bad, that was their job. Mine was to sleep at night knowing I did right. That is when it hit me. Rooster Cogburn didn't care what people thought because he knew he'd done right. That was enough. When I filmed that scene again, something was different, quieter, more certain. When I finished, Carl had tears in his good eye. You looked like a Marshal, Duke. I looked like you. But the scene that shocked everyone, the one that would win me an Oscar, happened during the famous charge. 4 men on horseback, Rooster with reins in his teeth, guns in both hands, yelling, "Fill your hands, you son of a bitch!" I'd practiced it for weeks, but something felt wrong. It feels like a movie stunt, not real, I told Carl. That is because it is, he replied. Then he told me about tracking 3 murderers to a farmhouse in 1934. Armed men, 1 hostage, no backup. I walked straight at that house, gun drawn, yelling so loud my throat bled. Told them I was coming in and they could surrender or die. What happened? They came out. All three surrendered. You know why? Because I wasn't bluffing. They saw it in my eyes. I was walking into that house either way. That is when I understood Rooster wasn't charging because he was brave. He was charging because he wouldn't let them hurt the girl. When I filmed it again, thinking about Carl, about the farmer's daughter, about walking toward certain death because someone innocent needed saving, something shifted. I wasn't acting anymore. I was honoring every forgotten hero who'd ever walked toward danger because it was right. The performance that would win me my first Oscar was born from the stories of a one-eyed Marshal who just wanted someone to remember that men like him had existed, that they'd mattered, that they'd been real. When True Grit wrapped, Carl went back to Arizona, back to being forgotten. But something had changed in both of us. 3 months later, I sent him a telegram, nominated for Academy Award. This one's for you, Marshal. On Oscar night, holding that statue, I thought about Carl Henderson, about all the real heroes Hollywood never celebrates, about the difference between playing a character and honoring the men who lived it. In my acceptance speech, I said, "This is for the real Marshals. The men who did the job and went home. The men who never got recognition." Later, I learned that Carl had watched on his small television in Arizona. His wife said he cried during my speech. Not sad tears, proud ones. For the first time in 20 years, someone had remembered. The real Rooster Cogburn wasn't a character. He was Carl Henderson and 100 men like him. One-eyed, broken, forgotten, but real. They'd given everything for justice and got nothing back but silence. Until one day, one of them walked onto my set and taught me the difference between acting and living. That is when I learned that the greatest performances don't come from imagination. They come from honoring the truth of people who lived what you are only pretending to understand. Carl Henderson died 3 years later. Heart attack, age 67. At his funeral, they displayed his Marshal's badge next to a photo of us on set. The real Rooster Cogburn and the actor who finally got it right. The lesson stayed with me every day after. When you tell someone's story, you better damn well honor the person who lived it, because somewhere out there, the real heroes are watching, hoping someone will remember they mattered. And they do matter. Every forgotten Marshal, every unsung hero, every person whose story becomes entertainment. They all matter. Carl Henderson taught me that. The hard way, the only way that counts.